We're just going to do a quick update on fraction decimal conversions. Quick review over just the basics of how to go from one to the other. When we first started talking about fractions and decimals, we started looking at a fraction part over total. A fraction is part of a whole number. Then we looked at decimals. Oh, let's put this as a fraction. Then we looked at decimals because we were wondering why we can go or how we can go from one to the other. If I look at my decimal place, this is my ones place, this is my tens. On this side, these are all whole numbers. These are the ones that we've always worked with. But on the other side, you have the decimals. This is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and it keeps going from there, but we're going to stop. To this side, this is a part of a whole, which is how they're related to fractions. They're the same thing, they just look different. So when we have a fraction like 1/2, and they say, how can I get that to a decimal? Well, I have to be able to put it in one of these place values called tens, hundredths, or thousandths. The problem is my denominator is a 2. I don't have a 2 place or a second place or a half place. So this number needs to be increased until it has a denominator that reads one of these. So you've used different things. One thing that we've used is in 4th and 5th grade is an E-chart, or maybe you called it an EFT. The whole purpose of it is its equivalence. I'm counting by ones on the top, so the next one would be a 2. 2's on the bottom, so the next one would be a 4. Again, I'm counting by ones on the top, 2's on the bottom. Notice I'm still not at a tenth, hundredth, or thousandth. I'm at a fourth, there is no fourth. Sixth, there is no sixth. What about 4 and 8? There is no eighths. 5/10ths, there is a tenth. That is a tenth place. That matches my place value in my decimal. So I'm going to take the 5/10ths. This is equivalent to a half. All of these are. 2/4 is a half. 3/6 is a half. 4/8 is a half. 5/10 is also a half. But how do I put it into that decimal place? Well, remember that all we do is we take our numerator, and that numerator is going to sit in the place value that the denominator matches. So this denominator is tenths, so this needs to sit in the tenths place. 1/2 is equal to 5/10ths. Another way it can be done, some of you that are really good at your multiplication facts, you can skip all this because look, it's taken me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What times 2 got me to 10? Well, that's just times 5. And whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top with fractions, and then I get 5/10ths. So this is just a faster way of getting here, but it both comes out the same. It's 5/10ths. Okay, so let's look at one like 1/4. 1/4 as a decimal. This is part of our benchmark, and it's part of our benchmark so that we know it really quickly. I can make 1/4 grow by doing an E-chart. But remember, I'm looking for a tenth, hundredth, or thousandth. So I count by ones on the top and 4's at the bottom. Okay, well, I've already passed up 10. So tenths is not going to work. I'm not going to get to a tenth. So the next one's a hundredths. That means I'm going to have to sit here and grow my chart all the way from 1/4
Jordan Samuels, if you're
Two
still in the building, could you please come to the front
hundredths.
office? Again, that's Jordan Samuels. If you're in the building,
That's
could you
not
please
gonna
come
work.
to the front office? Thank you.
That's going to take way too long. So it's a benchmark, and that's why we think benchmark and we memorize those just like our multiplication facts. However, with our fourths, our reminder is quarters, 25 cents, because we know we can't get to a tenth, so their next option is a hundredth. Well, I know 4 quarters equals $1. And so I just can multiply this times the 25 cents, or the quarter, and that gives me 25 hundredths. How do I make that a decimal? Write your 25. My last digit needs to be in the hundredths place. It needs to match my denominator. Well, I know this is tenths, so my decimal is here. Those two match. So the fourths we think of quarters, and that's why we don't want to have to do all this. It's going to take way too much time. So fourths think quarters. So I know that 2 fourths is the same as 50 hundredths, because I would multiply by 25. 3 fourths, well, 3 quarters is 75. The next one that we did was fifths, 1/5. Okay, well, 1/5, again, there's no fifths place. I need to get to a tenth, hundredth, or thousandth. Well, I can make this one grow really easy, because 5 is so close to 10. But the other way I could do this is start with a fifth. How do I get from 5 to 10? I know it can get to 10. I just multiply by 2, and whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top, which gives me that 2 tenths, and then I write it as a decimal. Well, I know that 2 needs to be in the tenths place, the decimal right in front. Notice they're also doubling. That's what we talked about with the fifths. You just double them. 1/5 is 2 tenths. 2 fifths is 4 tenths. They just double. Okay, then we went to the eighths. Then we went to the eighths. So I'm going to turn this over. And the eighths. Okay, I'm going to remind you of our place value. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Okay, my eighth is not here. I don't have one called eighth, so I've got to go to one of these. Okay, so you make it grow. I go to 2/16. I know that the tenths is not going to work. If I keep going, I'm getting all these equivalents, but look how far off. And look how much time it's taking me. And I'm still not at hundredths. If I went all the way to 100, I'd find there it doesn't get to an equal 100. That's why these eighths we want to memorize, because this 8 actually has to go all the way to the thousandths place, and you're going to be here forever doing this. So with my eighths, I am going to memorize my eighth is equal to 0.125. What that looks like in a fraction, it means that if I would have continued to grow these fractions and make my E chart longer and longer, this is where I would finally find that I have a decimal place value to match. It would not have stopped at the hundredths place, it stops at the thousandths. So with our eighths, remember, we just have got to memorize our eighths using our chant. 1/8.125, 2/8.250, 3/8.375, 4/8.500. Okay? So just make sure you're using your book and memorizing those so that you have it. And the last two that we really just threw in there was, these are special because they are repeating. Meaning if we calculated this out, it's 3 on and on and on and on. 2/3 is 6 repeated on and on and on and on and on. Okay, so those we just need to memorize, the 8s we just need to memorize. But if you are just converting nicer numbers like these, you can either make them grow or you can use multiplication. The multiplication just makes this process a little bit faster, especially if you're going that far down. We just don't want to waste 10 minutes of writing E-charts. We've got to get to where we can see multiplication, because we know we have to end up at a 10th, 100th, or 1,000th any time that we are trying to get to decimals.